Again, Gills fans, welcome back to the latest episode of Gills in the Blood TV. It's of course Sunday night, which means it's match day review show time. And as you can see, first and foremost, I'm once again flying solo for this week's match day review. We have not had Rhys for a few weeks now, and he has finally asked me to release a statement just to say that he is unavailable for these shows at the moment due to personal family reasons. So if we can respect Rhys's privacy on that matter at the moment, please, that would be greatly appreciated. And he has promised me and everyone else that he will be back soon. Hopefully, when he returns, he will have a win to discuss with myself. But the show must go on, so I am here to talk about what was a 0-0 draw with basement boys Carlisle United, which saw the Gills extend their unbeaten run to 3 games. It saw the Gills make it back-to-back clean sheets in the league, but unfortunately it also saw us extend our winless run now to 12 games, 8 of them under John Coleman, 4 of them under Mark Bonner, which ultimately saw the axe fall on the latter. Yeah, I think first and foremost, if you look at the comparative league positions, current form and goal scoring record of both of these sides, I think all of them factors meant that when the final whistle went and it had finished 0-0, it wasn't a great shock to anybody in the ground or keeping track of things on social media from afar. We'll go back to 2 o'clock like we always do on Saturday afternoon, first and foremost, and that was one change made by John Coleman as Joe Bode returned to the starting 11 at the expense of Jimmy J Morgan. So that team in full was Glenn Morris in goal, a back 3 of Smith, Emer and Gale. In front, a quartet of Hutton, McKenzie, Captain Little and Clark. And then it was Corness in between the lines, supporting Bode and Nevitt. The bench was fairly attacking, to be fair to John Coleman, whether that was through choice or necessity, but there was no defender on the bench. So it was a 7 of Turner, Nolan, Kumbeni, Clark, Dack, Hawkins and also Morgan, who had started the previous weekend against Crewe. It's a strange game to sum up, having watched it back, because it felt very open at times. But we've also said it's no surprise that it finished with no goals, given all the factors we've already mentioned. And I suppose it looked like a side very apparently devoid of confidence and devoid of form and any type of win recently. So, yeah, strange one. I think we had a couple of opportunities, didn't we? Either were blocked or off target, or I think Romeo Hutton's case hit the side netting from a tight angle, and Sam Gale one chance over the bar when Max Emer nodded it back into his path. I think Carlisle's best chance fell to, was it Sam Lavelle, centre back? I think it was a combination of Elliot Nevitt and one other, might have been Smith, who brilliantly put their bodies on the line to prevent the ball getting any further than them and forcing Glenn Morris into any type of save. But of course, the big moment for us was when Joe Bode escaped down the right-hand side and put a cross into a dangerous area. Their keeper tries to grab it and doesn't manage that, spills it to Nev. He's about 8 or 9 yards out. He doesn't do a lot wrong, to be fair to Nev. What's the saying? When you're a striker that can't score goals, you don't have a lot of luck, and any luck that you do have is bad luck. His effort cannons off the underside of the bar, drops onto the line and out rather than onto the line and in, and the game remained goalless. But at half-time, you're probably sort of thinking, both managers are saying, OK, we're in the game. Let's go and grab it by the scruff of the neck, and there's 3 points to be won. And we attempted at half-time to grab said game by said scruff and introduced Bradley Dack for Dom Corness. So no change to the system. Dacky going to try and play in them little pockets of space. Second half felt even weirder to me than the first period, I'm not going to lie. If you look at the stats, it says we had more possession. In terms of other numbers, there's not a great deal in it, but it felt like Carlisle had more control of the football match for me. I don't know what others think. Maybe you can let me know. But yeah, there wasn't, great opportunities to start with. Glenn Morris had to be alert a couple of times. I think their lad, is it Matthew Dennis, the young lad they had up front, has to score when the ball comes towards him. But it just sort of bounces off him and luckily falls at Glenn Morris. His hands, feet, you know what I mean. yeah, I just thought, I don't know, the change bringing on Daki wasn't sort of replicated in our performance second period, I guess is what I'm saying. And like I say, we've had to rely on Glenn Morris a couple of times, and we've certainly had to rely on him at the end. It's a wonderful save from the cat, the GOAT. Stephen Wen looks like he's winning the game all day long for Carlisle. Ball comes in from the left. He does everything right with his header. It's downward, it's into the corner. Glenn Morris, I'm not sure, sees it straight away, but somehow fully extends that right arm and gets a paw on it to push it round the post for a corner and preserve our clean sheet. Of course, the big moment for us, we will talk about quickly in a second. I mean, we've not had much in the way of clear-cut chances, have we? There's a Robbie McKenzie header that's gone over the bar from a Max Clark cross. I think he had a header first half as well that was saved. Joe Bode was still bright, still trying to, you know, get us up the pitch. A couple of snapshots that in another day maybe put us in front, or, you know, get us back on terms. Whether they've scored one of their chances, it's always a game of ifs and buts, isn't it? But yeah, the big moment for us is when Bode does really well, releases Elliot Nevitt with a really good ball. For all the world, it just looks like Nev's going to round the keeper and tap it into an empty net and gets wiped out. That's my view. Why would Elliot Nevitt go down in that situation and try and simulate a foul without contact? He's literally going to go round the keeper and tap the ball into the net. Referee decides otherwise, and that's the third game in a row for me where we've been harshly not awarded a spot kick. If you go back sort of 10 days or so to Walsall away, Nevitt again should have one. It's an absolute stonewaller at Walsall when the keeper goes AWOL and in the centre half just boots him in the shins. Last week against Crewe, we had a couple of calls, didn't we? One on Daki, who was just ran into the back of when trying to pick up a return ball from Ollie Hawkins in the box. The one at the end where, from our view in the ground, I wasn't sure whether it was a handball or Maxima had been pulled down by the back of his shirt. And then yesterday, comes back to that saying, doesn't it? If you're not getting any luck, what is it? When you're down the bottom, sorry, I've already said it. If you don't get any luck, and what you do get is bad luck. Doesn't just rain, it pours when you're down the bottom in 19th, and I'm sure Carlisle feel that way in 24th as well, but I can only talk for us. And yeah, the game ended up goalless, didn't it? And it's another point on the board, so in that sense it's a positive because we've maintained that gap between Carlisle and we've got games in hands. Morecambe have been beaten on the afternoon despite bossing a game against the league leaders, Walsall, for large periods. They then had a man sent off and lost the game 2-0. So it's a point gained. But we've got to start winning football matches. Number one, because we just need to remember how to get over the line. And number two, because we can't keep relying on other teams being worse than us to dig us out of this trough. I've spoken about losing draws and winning draws in recent weeks. I've mentioned Tranmere and Grimsby as losing draws. Tranmere, we were absolutely awful. Had to rely on them scoring our goal. Grimsby, because of the fact that we managed to chuck it away in the 95th minute, having bossed the second half. And then the winning draws for me have obviously been Walsall and Crewe most recently, where if we'd had 6 points, I don't think anyone could really have complained. We were brilliant from 1-0 down to get back on terms against Walsall and then created the better chances. And Crewe, we bossed the second half, didn't we, even before the red card, did everything but find a winner. But this one, I'm not really sure where it falls. So maybe in a roundabout way, that means it was probably the right result. Like I said, the positives, I said at the top of the show, there's positives in it. It's back-to-back clean sheets in the league. It's 3 unbeaten in the league, which is never a bad thing when you're struggling to win football matches. If you can't win them, make sure you don't lose them and that type of thing. The performances, I think, over the last 3 have been the most consistent that we've seen for a long time, certainly since John Coleman came in terms of we're not just getting 10 minutes here or 20 minutes there. We've been better for larger periods, albeit without finding a winning goal. But the caveat to all that is it's still no wins under Coleman and Bell. It's just 5 points from 24 available since they came in. And I fully understand that it's still largely a playing group that's seen off other managers. I understand that one of the signings in the winter window, was brought in to change how we play. Aisha Agbenoni's injured and has gone back to Crystal Palace for treatment. So he's got his hands tied behind his back in that sense, John Coleman. But he's brought in 4 other players of his own: Nelson Kambeni, Dom Cornish, Jimmy J Morgan and Andy Smith. So a lot of this group are now his. Like I've said, he's moulding us to how he wants us to be and what he wants us to look like. And we've seen little signs of it. The goal scoring issue we can't change. Unfortunately, it's historical at the moment. It goes back the best part of half a decade. But it's a results business, and we need to start winning football matches soon for all the reasons that I've said. I'm happy that he's found some continuity in selection. If you look at the last 3 games, we've played the same system, a 3-4-1-2 or a 5-3-2 out of possession to make us more resolute. I think it suits Maxima with more athletic centre-halves. Athletic's probably the wrong word in terms, but I mean younger, quicker centre-halves either side of him. It helps him out, he can marshal them. It gives us width with the wing-backs up the pitch. It allows us to have a front 2. And it also allows us to play a number 10 like a Corness or a Dak, depending on the game situation. So that's big positive. The question mark for me over John Coleman in the Carlisle game is we've kept hearing that he doesn't settle for points. He wants to win every football match. He'll set us up to win every football match. But, and I understand you get to a certain point in the game and you think, okay, let's take the point and run. But we had Jimmy J Morgan, who's a striker, who's come in to do a job for us. We got Jaden Clark, our top scorer, with 7 goals on the bench, the both of them. And yet in the final 5-6 minutes, we take off Elliot Nevitt. And that's not the issue. You've taken him off. He's run himself into a standstill. Or he's got a knock, or he's cramping up, or whatever. But why not just do a straight swap? Put Jimmy J Morgan up there, or Jaden Clark, and look like you're continuing to win the game. We went to looked like a back 5 and then a diamond. So we had Hutton, Smith, Aymer, Gale, Max Clark, and then it was a quartet of Kambeni who'd come on, Mackenzie, Little and Dak, and then you've left Ollie Hawkins who'd come on earlier in the piece up front on his own. Now, Ollie Hawkins has a lot of strengths to his game. I mean, you can play off of him, you can play it into his chest and his head and it will stick, and then you can get runners off him, but you can't play Ollie Hawkins as a lone striker. He can't get about the pitch. He's not mobile enough to do that role for me. So that was a question mark. Like I say, not on Nevitt coming off, just on who we replaced him with. And the other thing, unfortunately, like I've already mentioned, is we can't dress up the fact that we're averaging 0.62 points per game under John Coleman. Now, I know it's not always instant, but we've certainly had no manager bounce, have we? No new manager bounce at all. Yeah. Answers on a postcard, I guess, because if you look at longest winless runs of our last 4 managers, because they're the 4 that have been in charge since the takeover, so for me that's the fairest way to do it. You've got Neil Harris out in front with 12 games between September 22 to January 23. But obviously that was before the Gallinson money came in, aside from 2 games, I think against Sutton and Colchester, where we couldn't actually play any new players. So that's 12. John Coleman's 3/4 of the way towards that, with what I think any Gills fan would say is a better group of players with 8. If you go after the takeover, Neil Harris's was 3 games from in March 2023, and also the last 3 before the axe fell on him. Stephen Clements was 4 games in March 2024. Mark Bonners was 6 in October of 2024, and then 4, which saw him sacked as well. And I'm not for 1 minute saying we sacked John Coleman, but all of these other managers would have massive question marks over them if they was at 8 games unbeaten. By myself, by any fan. That's not based on whether anyone, myself, likes this manager better than that manager or dislikes that manager better than this manager. It's just facts. You cannot go along at 0.62 points per game and think that that's successful, or in any way that's something to say, right, let's give the man the job full time on. I know the caveat is that we've got a lot of players out of contract at the end of the season, so it's likely to be a very new group. Again, answers on a postcard. We all see it different, but personally for me, I'm not going to sit here and say give John Coleman the job full time just yet. I'm willing to give him to the end of the season, and I've certainly seen shoots of recovery in the last 3 football matches. But my only concern in them 3 football matches was it just felt like we were settling for a point against Carlisle in the last period of the game, which goes against everything that John Coleman keeps saying to us in the press. Anyway, I don't want to end on a negative, and I thought the performance from a few players was very good yesterday. I think the likes of Glenn Morris obviously makes big save right at the end. We know that. He's a very good goalkeeper. Andy Smith settled in really, really well since coming to the club. Another solid performance from him. Max Ema looks back to his best. Now he hasn't got the weight of a captain's armband on his shoulders or around his arm. Sam Gale again looks like he's made to play in League Two. But I thought our best 2 players, for what they offered, were probably Max Clark and Joe Bode for me. And it was difficult to tell between the 2 who was man of the match in my eyes. If you look at Max Clark and Bode, they could both have at least 1 assist, can't they? Clark's delivery from wide left was really good. He's put a couple on the head of Robbie McKenzie. Joe Bode could have 2 assists if Nevitt's effort first half goes in off the bar, or if the penalty gets given. For me, that's an assist for Joe Bode because he's the one that's created the award, if we'd got it. But yeah, Max Clark in terms of stats, 4 clearances, 3 tackles. And I know other defenders had more, but if you couple that with the fact that 4 key passes from left wing back, absolutely outstanding. His crossing accuracy was really good as well. 75% pass completion rate, absolutely superb. And then Bode, 78% pass completion, like I say, could have had those 2 assists, couple of shots on target. You know what you get with Joe. He wants to be forward thinking. He won't stop harrying and harassing opposition players. And in terms of Max Clark, I think he looks back to pretty much the left-sided defender that we signed from Stevenage a couple of seasons ago that got promoted out of this division. So yeah, wanted to end on a positive. Still some questions to be asked and answered. Hopefully it turns out to be an important point further down the line. And I think the next 2 games we've got at home ultimately determine where this season ends up going. Playoffs, we can completely talk. We can completely write off and not talk about. But if we can go and pick up 4 points from the next 2 home games, it means that we can not relax, but we can start hopefully enjoying the remaining games and see more come to fruition of what John Coleman wants us to look like if it is to be a John Coleman Gillingham more longer term. The concern obviously is if we don't win any of them, the winless run will be at 10 for John, it'll be at 14 overall, and we'll still be looking over our shoulder. But I've seen enough in the last 3 to feel a little bit more confident that we're going to take something from these 2 home games. Anyway, that's enough from me this week. We'll be back Tuesday night at the Priestfield under the lights as we take on Fleetwood for another match day live. We'll then return after that for a match preview with a Morecambe fan before returning at the end of the week to Priestfield again for the 2nd time in a few days. And let's hope by this time next week we're talking about a couple of wins. But as always, thanks for watching and thanks for listening. Please, please, please continue to hit that like button and please consider pressing subscribe. It's free to do so and it really helps me and my channel. I hope you've had a decent weekend. Fair play to the 402 of you that travelled all the way to Carlisle and back to cheer on the boys. And of course, before we finish up the Gills.